Welcome everyone. My name is Kathy Hart and I will be facilitating our art class this morning. And we are going to learn how to paint both a shamrock and a sunflower. This class is being recorded and will be uploaded to YouTube. Everyone who registered will get a copy of the link. Wanted to let you know a little bit about our hosting organization. It's called Renaissance Society. It's here in Northern California in the Sacramento area, and we are through where we actually do our classes through Sacramento State University. So this is the first semester since the pandemic. We have been back on campus, but we continue to do both Zoom classes and hybrid classes. This is a Zoom only class, and it's also different in that it's not just members only. One of our values with the Renaissance Society is giving back to the community. So this is open to the community, which means open to the world through Eventbrite. So welcome everybody. And we are going to have some fun painting classes today. All right, what I'd like to do is get focused on the actual painting. So you should see my tabletop. There's two things we're going to do today. We're going to honor the Ukrainian people by doing a very simple watercolor painting. But because it's St. Patrick's Day, let's remind ourselves, really, how do we paint, first draw and then paint a shamrock. So this is one that just has kind of doodles on it. Let's see if I can bring it closer so you can see it a little better. Oh, the light isn't great, but there you go. You can kind of see that. It's got some doodles around. This I did a while ago. I actually have to decide my classes way in advance. So I think I decided last either October or November what I was going to be teaching this semester for Renaissance. So let's start with how do you paint or how do you draw a shamrock? Well, they're really, either if you do a 3-leaf or a 4-leaf, it's a heart. And it's just connected or touching in the middle. So everybody remembers how to do a heart. We're just going to, now I'm not painting, I'm drawing.
Excuse me, I'm sorry. I'm seeing you, not what you're doing. Am I supposed to be?
All right, let me see. Okay, I think I've pinned the wrong one. Thank you for saying that. Okay, now what do you see? Is this the desktop that you see now?
Yeah, yes, now we can see it. Thank you so much.
Thank you for saying something. Of course, when I tried it, it worked beautifully. And now when I do it live, it always gives me problems. Okay, so we are going to do the shamrock shape by making 3 hearts that are going to basically kind of touch in the middle. I'm using a marker so you can see my drawing. If you're drawing this out, please use pencil and do a light sketch. So I'm just going to do a 3-leaf clover, making the centers touch. I'm just showing you how to draw it here. Doesn't have to be perfect. And then I'm just going to bring a little stem. Okay, so that's how I would draw it. If you had if you wanted a 4-leaf clover, the 4th one would just be where my stem is, and then you'd have the stem going in between one of your, or 2 of your hearts. Okay, so to paint this, let's go ahead. I'm going to just use some cardstock. And I'm going to wet my light green paint. And if you don't have a light green, you can take your green that you have, if it's more a little darker of a green, and just add some bright yellow to it. And that's going to give you the color you're looking for. So I'm wetting my paint. This is called activating your watercolor. And I'm actually going to use a smaller one. I did not draw this out, so we'll see how it turns out. And I'm just going to paint in 3 hearts. So we practice with an actual, oh, that's very light. There we go. So I'm doing my first heart. You can go ahead and paint along. I'm doing my third leaf. Now, I believe that everyone can do art and you shouldn't have to spend $50 to start. It's perfectly fine if you had a Crayola or something similar kind of watercolor to begin with. And I actually believe in using what you have, so you don't need to go buy expensive watercolor paper. I will say that watercolor works best with watercolor paper, but it isn't required. So now I'm doing my stem. I'm trying to get the light there for you. So that's how mine looks. Very, very simple. You can put that, like I said, I'm using actually cardstock. It's a tiny, tiny bit shiny. So it gives me kind of a funny little finish, but it's fine for what our purpose is here today. Just learn how to do it, learn how to draw it, and how to make a simple shamrock. Then you can put that up somewhere and just enjoy it. And if you prefer to do something a little more elaborate, I did 3 here. And then I also did some tiny buds. This is just like a tiny little, not really a heart shape, but just kind of a single little leaf. And then I did some kind of curly cues. I did that with the green pen that I had. Trying to get it so you can see that. There we go. So that's what I did a while back when I was thinking of what to do for today. So that is the shamrock. I'm going to make a little room here on my desk. And the next thing we're going to do will be a very, very simple sunflower. And it's actually just a quarter of a sunflower. Now you can orient this any way you want. I'm going to put the quarter of the head on the bottom left side, but you could have it this way. You could, I can't show you this, but you could have it up here or you could have it down here. So there isn't just one way to do it. This is just the way I'll be teaching it today, but the idea is the same. And we're going to start off doing a brown semicircle right here, quarter circle, and fill that in with a light brown. Now, if you don't have a brown in your palette, that's okay. Take a little red and a little green and mix it and you'll have brown. And if you want a lighter shade, add more water and that'll work for your, that'll work for a brown. So I'm going to show you just basically how we're going to, I'm actually going to paint it, but if you want to draw it, you can. So let's go ahead and let me show you how I draw it. First, I'd start with the semicircle. I'm again using a marker so you can see it. You would use pencil. It's kind of a big circle. And then I'm just going to start with the petals coming off. And I'm going to have it pretty much touch. I'm going to do the innermost petal layer first. Very simple. All the way around that quarter circle. So that's the first layer. And then I'm going to come in behind and do a second layer of petals. But this time, I'm just going to do part of it. Just the top of the petal. And that would give a basic outline of what we're going to paint. Now I've done a number of these, which is why I'm actually not going to draw it. I'm just going to paint it. And it's actually very forgiving because a lot of it is the same color. Okay, so let's start with whatever your paper you're going to use. And I'll tell you, I use this side, which is probably around anywhere between 3.5 to 4.25 by 4.25 by 5. I do card size, and I'll show you why. I do a lot of painting, but I like them to be quick. I don't want to spend most of the time 4 or 6 hours on a painting. So here's an example of a sunflower that I painted. So here's the painting, and this is actually on cardstock. It's not watercolor paper. So I did the painting, and then I glued it onto this brown cardstock, which I then glued onto cardstock for a card. I happen to have a matching envelope. So I like to make cards with my watercolor paintings. I usually sign it on the back. Evidently I did this one in the wrong direction, but that's okay. So I put my name and the date, and I like to give the cards that I make not only for my own personal use, but I like to give them to charities that are doing, raffles and different things like that as fundraisers. Okay, so we want to take a light brown. We always in watercolor start out light and then you add layers of color. So if you have a light brown, let's go ahead and activate that brown. And we're going to just do that little semicircle. Oops. And we'll fill it in. And as we're working on other parts, that part will dry. So I just did my brown in one corner. It could be any of the 4 corners. I did the bottom left. We're going to clean our brush. And you might notice that I am just barely touching it to a paper towel that I have nearby. Now I'm going to take a light yellow and activate that. Again, we're working light to dark. You can see in the actual painting, let me see if I can get it so you can see that. Yeah, that there's actually more than one color of yellow. So we're starting with our lightest color and we're going to do the petals. So you can start wherever you want. I'm going to start on the bottom right. And I'm just going to, okay, let's make sure you can see that. And I'm just going to follow if I had drawn it, I'm going to do the inside petals first. So these are first. So I'm just going to kind of arc it out and fill that in. And I'm not worried about getting it really dark. A light wash is fine because I'm going to go over this a couple times. So that's one petal, and I'm just going to go all the way around that semicircle. And I'm going to come close to, I'm going to try to almost touch them like I did in the drawing. And fill it in. And let's just go all the way around. And I have a little bit of space there. There we go. Okay, so I've got my first layer of light yellow. And now my brown is pretty well dry. So I'm going to go in, I have a darker brown, and I'm just going to tap in some of that darker brown, two different places. I'm going to tap it in this bottom part that's closest to my edge, and then also along the top. And I'm going to kind of go over, don't make it a straight hard edge, kind of go in a little bit to the yellow petals. And I'm just going to add a little bit of depth. So I'm taking my my paintbrush that has a darker brown, and I'm really just going to dot. You know, I want to give it some texture here, so I don't want it to be perfectly painted. I'll go a little bit higher because I just want almost a tiny little gap in between. Okay, so that's the bottom corner. Now I'm going to get a little more paint and go up along the top. Again, just dabbing it, but I'm going over the edge. Just dabbing away, but kind of going over into my yellow a little bit. Again, I don't want a hard line on either side. So I'm actually in the middle here. I'm going to dab a couple of spots, but it's definitely concentrated on the bottom quarter and at the top edge. I'm rinsing my brush, taking off any paint on my paper towel. Okay, I think what I want to do now is go into a slightly darker yellow, and I'm going to do the back. If it were in nature, you know, the further away, and if it's behind something, the darker it would be. So I'm going to get a slightly darker yellow, and I'm going to do these back petals, which are really just the tips. So in between my petals, okay, you'll probably see this. Let's see. I'm just going to do another petal and bring it down. Now I'm going to add more color to the front petals, but this will really help me quickly know where my front petals are and where my back petals are. So I'm just doing the tips, and then I'm filling that in. I'm actually not going all the way down right now. I will put more color down here, but not yet. Filling in the tips all the way across your sunflower of the petals that are behind. Okay, for me, because I have another brush that has a little finer tip, this is the brush I was using. It's a 7 round. And it was fine for the petals and for the hearts that I did on the shamrock. But now I'm going to get a slightly smaller one. This is a 5 round tip, because I want to add more color to those front petals, but I don't want it to just I don't want to make it the same color as the back petal. So I'm going to take some of the darker paint that I used for the back petal, and I'm just going to start doing some lines, adding color that way, just some lines along my petals, trying to add a little dimension. I'm going to do that several times with different colors, but right now I'm going to use my darker yellow. And I'll start at the part closest to the center, and I'm just going to pull it out and pull it out and pull it out, as many as you want. Just adding some color. Okay. So it's got a lighter, you can't see it really well because of the light here, but it has a light yellow background. And then I'm doing these darker yellow streaks. I go along the end and then I just kind of go down the middle and wherever. And I'm following the curve of the petal. So you can see this one, it's following the curve of the petal. And we'll just do that with all of our front flower petals. I brought a little brown up with mine, but that's okay. And while we let those petals dry, let's go back to the center of the sunflower and add a little bit of yellow. If you have a yellow ochre, which is kind of a dark, let's see if I can show you. Oh no, that's not going very well. If you have a dark yellow, great. If not, mix just a tiny bit of brown with your with a yellow. Yeah, it's hard to see the colors in the camera. I apologize for that. I am looking into working with an organization that has much better videography and cameras and all of those things, but it's just me in my office right now. So I have my brush loaded with some of the darker yellow, almost a golden color, and I'm just going to dot that in both in this bottom corner and then along the top where we made it darker. So I've got my brush loaded and I'm going to go in and just add some of that kind of golden color to the center of the flower. Yeah, you can't really see it. I think I'm going to take some of the darker brown that I used on top of my light brown here in the corner. And I'm actually where I have a lot of white space in between my petals. I'm going to build that up with just a tiny bit of brown. I'll show you what I mean. So here's my white space, and I'm just going to put a little more brown in there, kind of bring it out to the white area, just so I don't have so much white. So it's definitely not a straight line now, the center of the flower. I don't want that much white. So I'm rinsing my brush again. I'm going to put some of that darker brown down here in the corner as well, because it's not quite as dark as I want it. So I'm going to go in there and add some on the top. You're just deepening your layers when you are adding watercolor on top of watercolor. I'm going to do a little bit more at the outer edge. Okay, then I think my center looks okay now. Got a light brown in the middle with a tiny bit of brown splotches, and then much darker in the center and the edge with some of the brown going over up into the space between my petals. So now I'm going to take that darker yellow, almost gold color that I put into the center of the sunflower. I'm going to take some of that on my brush and I'm going to do more streaks. And I'm going to just add that additional color. I might not do as many streaks this time. Let's see. I just want a little bit. Yeah, that was pretty straight. Just trying to add. And I'm actually going on the side. I didn't like how straight that all looked. Okay, so I'm changing it from a line instead of holding my paintbrush perpendicular to the paper, I'm going on the edge of my brush and making a bigger line. See that? I'm not like a pencil making a thin line. I'm going on the side. And let's do that to the rest of your petals. And we will come back and do that to the back petals as well. So I'm actually going to start out with kind of a thin line. And then I'm going to come in and go on the side of my brush. Oops, that one was a lot. That's all right. The thing of it is, there's no right or wrong way. It's art. So whatever you make is going to be beautiful. So now you can see the color a bit better. Those are the front petals. I'm going to do the same thing to the petals in the back with this darker golden yellow, almost light brown. While you're finishing up, I'm going to check and see if I have questions. You're welcome. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Now, your sunflower is done. So if you like how it looks and you're perfectly happy, great. You can be finished. Or you can take a light blue wash and just go around the petals. This only takes a second, but you want a light wash. You don't want a dark one. So I'm going to go ahead and put some blue in there. I'm going to go over to my blue and add quite a bit of water to activate it and get a light wash going. Okay, and my pink's ready now. So I'm going to start going close to my petal, and then I'm just going to fill in the other. And you don't have to be exact. This is just to give an illusion of some sky in the back. Doesn't have to be perfect, but it helps add a bit of color. Plus that's also the on the flag of the Ukrainian flag. It's blue and yellow. So I'm just popping in a bit of blue around my flower, starting by my petals, and then just adding the blue. And I really don't have any on the top there. If you want, you can go back and get it a little closer. So my sunflower now has some light blue around the petals. And I didn't do this extra step. Oh, I didn't show how I set up the round palette. This was this is some old watercolors I had, and I just put what colors I had. This is a very inexpensive set of watercolors that my son got for me. You could use a Crayola set of watercolors if you're just starting out. This is from a tube. This is was the paint in the little, very similar to like a Crayola. So my thing is you just use what you have or start out with very inexpensive products. See if you like it. And if you like it, you can always upgrade both your brushes and your watercolor paints. I have other watercolor paints that I use, but I don't want anybody to be intimidated about making art. I want to make it accessible for everyone. So one of the things I did not do on either of these paintings so far, but I did on my card. So I want to show this to you, just in case you think you like this effect. It's really simple. You might see these dots that are around inside the sunflower head. That's actually, they do have those, the dots, depending on what kind. What I do to make it pop a bit, so I'll go ahead and do it today for this one. I've got some acrylic paint here. It's the very end of a small little craft paint bottle that I have. I'm going to use two tools. One is a Q-tip, and I'm going to dip this in. So I just have I can't really see it, but a tiny bit of paint at the end. And I'm just going to dot that around in small little dibs and dabs and dots. And that actually helps that pop a little. Now this one is more of a gold. If I had a brighter yellow, which is I think the one I used for the other painting, that would even pop more. Let me show you what this golden yellow looks like. And that was using a Q-tip. You could also, yeah, it doesn't show up really well. You can also use a toothpick to make smaller dots. So here's the brighter yellow. You could use white if you like. And you can see the bigger dots are from a Q-tip. And then I have some really small dots in here. That's from a toothpick, the end of a toothpick. So those are some ideas. It's not watercolor, but it's multimedia, and you are just adding a little bit of stronger color at the end. And like I said earlier, what I do with these paintings, I make them into cards. Here's one that I mounted. I glued it onto some light brown cardstock, basically the color of a paper bag, and then glued that to a card. I just folded cardstock. I don't buy cards. And that's what I use with an envelope. And I will either use those myself and send to friends, or I donate them for different events, different fundraising opportunities in my community. So that's what I like to do with it. I will show you very briefly what our next class will be next month, but I want to answer if anybody has any questions. Okay, no problem. Let me show you what we're going to do next month. It's another very simple watercolor. We're going to do a watering can with, and this is actually quite simple. We're going to learn a little bit about shadowing, and then we're going to put some flowers, very simple flowers, in the watering can. So that's what we're going to do. And we're instead, this I did a long time ago. We're going to try to do this type of flower, I think is what we'll put in the watering can. Very, very simple. It's basically just little tiny shapes of paint, and I varied the color going down the flower. So real simple. We will absolutely be able to finish a painting that you could use for a card in the hour that we have. Is just today we're at 40 minutes and we are done. So good. Let me see what's in the chat here. You're welcome. Absolutely. You're welcome. Let me go ahead and stop the recording. And like I said, I will